Hello everyone, my name is Prashant. I'm working as a MuleSoft architect. So welcome back to the third session of Anypoint Code Builder series. We already had our first two sessions, where in the first session I've explained what all softwares we need and how to get started. And in the second session we have gone through the first option, that is designing an API. And in this session we are going to check how to implement that particular API. So if you have not gone through the first two sessions, I'll request you all to have that sessions first, and then you can continue with this session. So in this session, we are going to check the second option. So whatever RAML fragments or whatever RAML specifications we have published in our previous session, we are going to implement the same RAML file here. So let's go on this option, click this option, and as soon as you click it, it will ask you for some information, that is the project name, the project location, the API specification to be searched, and the exchange, runtime version, and Java version. So let us give a name, something like student API implementation. Okay, then I'll search the asset in Exchange by adding some filter. Then here I'll select the my business group name, and at this point we have only one asset published, so I'll add that asset in my API. In the Mule runtime, I'll select it as 4.4. I've already downloaded the other Mule runtime, that's why it's visible in this drop down list. So I'll select 4.4, and the Java version which is applicable for this is only Java 11. So I'll have these configurations and create project. So as soon as you create project, the required libraries which are needed for Visual Studio, that will be downloaded, and you'll see this project getting opened in a separate Visual Studio window. So as soon as the project is open, you'd see a similar structure which you're currently seeing in Anypoint Studio, where we will have one src folder under which we have main and test. So under main we have Java, Mule, and resources. So all our Java code will reside in this folder. All our Mule XML configuration files or Mule XML code will reside in this Mule folder, and all the resources which are needed for this code to work, that will go in this resources folder. Similarly for test, the test Java code which are required for our munits to run, that will reside here. Then our munit file will reside here, and the resources which are needed for this munit will reside here. Along with that, we also have a mule artifact.json file and one POM XML file. So the similar structure we are seeing in Anypoint Studio, and the similar we are having here in this Anypoint Code Builder. So there is not much of the differences. Okay, so let me open our XML file now. So our XML file is this. Now we have renamed our implementation, that is this project, to this name, and the RAML file which we have published in our previous session is with this name, that is student API part 2. So what I will do is I'll rename this student part 2 with the student API implementation. For this, I need to copy the name. I'll delete this file, it's not needed, and I'll rename this file to that particular name. That's all. Okay, and as soon as you open this file, you'll see there are two sub windows. On the left hand side, you'll see the code in the canvas view, and on the right hand side, you'll see the same code in the code view, that is XML view. Okay, so if you select any connector, so let's go step by step. So for now, this is how it will look as soon as you open the your project. Now on the top left side, you'll see two options. First option is add. That is, if you want to add any flow, any subflow, or on error continue propagate, or any error handler. So with this option, you can create it. Now what all flows we have in our API, if you want to see that, we can use the other option, that is flow list, and here you'll be able to see what all flows we have in our API project. Along with that, this is the flow which is the default, which is at present open default, right? Now here we don't have a lot of things, it's just one HTTP listener and one router to route our request to the specific subflows. Along with that, we also have one default error handler created, and which has some default messages like whatever we saw, we currently are seeing in Anypoint Studio. The same is there with Visual Studio as well. Now let us go. Let's recap our use case which we had in our previous session, previous session. So the use case which we followed was that we have created one YAML file with two endpoints. The first endpoint is to store the student information in the database, and the second endpoint to fetch the particular student based on a specific ID. Now, in this API implementation, we will try to optimize, or we'll try to improvise our use case by adding one proper condition in between. Like for example, the students which are from country India, that will only be allowed to store the information in the database. Okay, and the students from other countries will not be allowed, and we as an application team, we will provide a specific message to the requester that this student is from the other country other than India, and the information is not allowed to be passed or to be stored in the database. So for that, we'll have to go to the flow which is post students, and in post students at present we can see that there is only one transform message with one hard-coded information, that is students successfully added. Okay, now what we gonna do is we will add one choice router before this. Click the plus button and you'll see one window getting populated. Search the choice router here, flow reference, flow control, and as soon as you click it, you'll see the when condition as well as the otherwise condition. Okay, now for when condition, we'll add one condition, that is when the payload has the country equal to India, then only allow the message to enter to the database. Okay, now we have added this condition. Now we need to add one variable, so it will be a HTTP variable. Now once you click it, we need to provide the variable name, so it will be HTTP status. So if you remember, this is the default variable which is added in the HTTP listener for any transactions. So if you go to any HTTP listener, you'll be able to see that particular variable is the default variable. So it checks for the value of this variable, and if it doesn't find, then the default value will be provided as a 500 in case of error and 200 in case of success. So we will overwrite this value with our value, that is, as we are inserting the value, so it will be 201 instead of 200. Okay, now as soon as the variable value are set, we also need to provide the message, the payload, to the customer, or we can say to the consumer, that you are allowed to be get inserted into the database or something like that, similar success message. Okay, now for that, what we will do is, now let's try to update that in the XML view. Okay, now the same transform message, whichever is available here. Now what I will do is, I'll copy the same transform message, that is this one. I'll cut it and I'll add that in the when clause after the set variable or before set variable. Okay, so it says student successfully added. So if you see in the flow canvas, we will see that variable is now at the first position and transfer message is now at the second position. It doesn't matter if it can be vice versa as well. Okay, now in the otherwise section, we need to provide the HTTP status as HTTP status value as maybe 400, something like bad request. Okay, so it will be a HTTP status. Okay, and the message should populate like this. So I'll copy the same transform message from that when clause, and it will now be pasted to the otherwise clause. And here we will update the message like, sorry, we only accept students from country India. Okay, simple, straightforward message. Okay, so this is one sample condition we have now added. So instead of adding all the entries, it will check for the country, and based on that, it will either add it or it will basically, it will not add it, and then it will provide the proper message. So at this point, we are not actually adding it to any real database. It's just a mocking thing we are doing in this implementation phase as well. But in real life, we can route this request to some database call and we can get that information added respectively. Now we are done with the coding part. Now what we will do is we will deploy this in our local to test if this functionality is working or not. Now for that, we need to go to this run option, and we can either do a start debugging or either we can do a run without debugging. Now let me select the first option and let's wait till this application is getting deployed. So till the application is getting deployed, I'll explain you a few other options. Like if you see on the top right corner, right? So this is an option if you want to open this in an Einstein window. Okay, so if you want to give the prompts like the AI prompts that generate me a code which will, you know, which will take out the records from the source, which is Salesforce, and insert that to the any target RDBMS database, something like Oracle database. So it will give you a template of that code, and you don't have to basically add that or create that code manually. So it will be a helping hand for you. So if you want to open that, you can see this option. Along with that, if you want to open this in a text view, we can open that using this option. Then in this session, we are going to check this option. But before that, it's already deployed now, and let's try to test if this functionality is working or not. Now let me see which port it is basically accepting all the requests. So it's 8081, the default one. Okay. Now the first request which I'm going to hit here is, so if you see, we have a localhost 8081 and the endpoint, which is API students, and we have a payload where ID, name, result, and country. So here the country we are passing it as an India. So let's try to hit this endpoint and let's see what request we are getting. So we are getting a 201 which is created instead of 200, which was the default value, and we are getting a proper message that student successfully added. Let's check for the China. So for China, I have provided ID to some default random name, the result, and the country. Now, once I hit that, we will see that the message is getting as 400 bad request instead of 500 default error message, and the message as well that sorry, we only accept students from country India. Okay, so it's a simple use case with one in between condition to check which to check the students are from which country. Okay, now as we have tested that in local, now what I will do is I will deploy this to our Anypoint Runtime Manager. So before that, let me stop this server and then click this deploy to cloud up option. As soon as you click it, you should see one deploy.json file getting auto created for you under this resources tab. Okay, and it has all the information needed for this application to get deployed, like the runtime, at which runtime it will be deployed, the worker size, the application name, the worker, and the auto start. Okay, instead of updating anything in between, what I will do is I'll go straight away to it and I'll click the deploy to CloudOp. Now, as soon as you click that, it will ask which environment you need to deploy. It's sandbox for now. Now, as you see, that API has now been successfully deployed to Anypoint Platform. Now, let us try to check and test if it behaves the same as it was behaving in local. So for that, I have copy pasted the endpoints and I have updated the hostname to the CloudUp. Now this is the new hostname, and this is basically for the country India, which has the student from country India. And if I hit it, we should see the same response, that is student successfully added with 201 as a created. And let's see for the second one. Now for this, we have the student from China, and once we hit it, we should see a message that sorry, we only accept students from India with the HTTP status code as 400. So that's all for today. So for today we have seen the option that is implement an API, where we have implemented the API which we have published in our previous session, and we have added one extra check in the API while implementing, that we will only accept the student's entry from the country India and not from any other country. So instead of China, if we provide any other country, that in that case as well, the entries will not be added, and we should see the sorry message in all of that cases as well. Along with that, we have also seen how to deploy this API to Anypoint Exchange, and we have also tested the same API in local as well as Anypoint Exchange as well. So thank you all for what